a group of them right there, heard the words of Jeremiah that he spoke to the people. And this is what Jeremiah said to them. He who remains in the city shall die by the sword and by famine. If you're going to remain in the city, you're going to die. You're going to starve or you're going to get pierced by a sword. And there's going to be pestilence and sickness. But if you go out over to the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, you're going to live. And your life will be a prize. You get to keep your life. You're going to live. Then he says in verse 3, he says this. He says, this city is surely going to be given into the hands of the king of the Babylonian army, and it's going to be taken. Therefore, the princes, this is the leader, said to the king, they said, please let this man Jeremiah be put to death. Put him to death. Quiet him. He's weakening the hands of war. All those that remain in the city are getting worried. He's speaking these words to them. For this man, now listen to this. This is the lie. This man doesn't seek the welfare of this people, but to their harm. He's telling them how to live. You're going to live if you do this. But they twisted it and said, it's going to be to your harm. It's a complete lie. Then Zedekiah the king says to them, look, he's in your hand. Do with him as you want to do with him, okay? So they took Jeremiah and cast him into the dungeon, which was in the court of the prison, and they let Jeremiah down with ropes into the dungeon because there wasn't any water, there was only mud, and Jeremiah sank in the mire. Now listen, this dungeon was an old cistern in the middle of the prison, okay, where it kept the runoff water, and they roped him down. This wasn't your modern day prison, okay, 3 hots and a cot. And I know it's violent, prison's violent. This wasn't even close. They dropped him into an old cistern. This thing used to just catch the runoff water. That's all that it did. In the rainy seasons, then in the dry seasons, they'd get the water. But because the Babylonians had surrounded the city, they couldn't get out of the city. You can't get out. So you have to just kind of drink the water that's there and use the resources. And they had drinking all the water. So then they decided, you know what we'll do? We'll turn this thing into a prison. How cruel is that? We're going to put people down into this dungeon and inflict death upon them. We don't like what they say. We're going to put them down in the bottom of this thing. And that's what they took the man of God and put him down in that thing. Now, this is the example because we're watching the man of God get put down into a dungeon. You ever been into a tight spot? You have ever been to a place where you're back against the wall? You say, Pastor, I'm there right now. It's coming to the end of the month, and I'm just trying to figure things out. Back against the wall. Jeremiah's got his back against the wall. He's put down into a dungeon. How does he respond to it? What's he going to do in all of these things? Because these people are wicked. That's mean. In fact, you want to hear something really interesting? Now, this is how perverted they made the truth. Okay? This is how the wickedness of what they believe the truth is gets twisted. Now, the Hebrewic culture, okay? There was a belief, no, that's not true. There was a belief that if you didn't actually personally kill the person with your own hands, then you wouldn't be penalized for the death. For instance, if we drop Jeremiah down into this dungeon, okay, and he happens to starve down there because he doesn't have anything to eat, then it's not really our fault because he died of starvation. He didn't die because I choked him. Do you get how twisted that is? That's how evil it is. They would tie you up into a chair or something and then leave you and say, well, we won't get the penalty or punishment for that because we didn't actually, it's not my fault you didn't have anything to eat. I mean, didn't eat. So, isn't that weird? Isn't it weird? So they drop him down there. And then they feel like, well, I mean, if he starves, he starves. But I didn't take a sword to him. Boy, that logic just doesn't wash, does it? These guys are mean. You know as well as I do, you can have people around your life that are mean, that seek to do you harm. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to give you the answer. You're going to cry out to Jesus. You're going to cry out to the Lord. You see, about 80% of the time, I find myself first trying to solve the problem on my own. That's just my tendency. It's like if I'm healthy and strong enough, then I'll get up and I'll try to do something about it. instead of realizing that it doesn't matter the size of the problem. It doesn't matter how big it is. God's whole response that he's longing for is to be the one that rescues you. He's the one he wants you to say, help me, rescue me. And you know how many times we find ourselves in a position where that's all he's longing for us to ask, and we don't cry out. We wait until the last minute and all the resources are exhausted, and we don't have any more strength in us to say, help. But God says, no, you call out at the moment you need my help. There's none like the God of Jeshurun, none like the God of Jeshurun who rides on the heavens to help you, who rides on the chariot of the clouds to come to your rescue. There's none like him. That's why I say that verse. He's there to help me and ride on the sky to come and rescue me. It's in his nature to rescue, to rescue, to rescue. Once you cry out to him. Jeremiah is in the cistern, and that's exactly what he's doing, is crying out. The truth is this. When no one else hears your cries, you know who does? God hears your cries. He sees every act of wickedness. He sees every mean thing that's done and said towards you. He sees every plan and plot and strategy to harm and hinder you. He sees them all. Nothing's kept in secret. No plan, no conspiracy is ever kept. He knows the heart of every individual. And when somebody comes up and they do you something bad, and you say, Lord, why in the world did you let that happen? You can trust in the fact that the Lord knows what was in the heart of that individual. He saw these wicked men letting him down in that cistern. He knew their heart. But he was trying to just call out and say, listen, what a more perfect picture than to see the prophet of God with the word encouraging the people to cry out to the Lord, because Babylonians are surrounding the city, and he's trying to tell them, please, cry to the Lord. And they wouldn't. They were more concerned that Jeremiah's words would discourage the people on the wall, the soldiers, because they thought they could defend their city on their own. So he said, he's messing it all up. And Jeremiah was just telling them, why don't you cry out to the Lord for help? Why do you keep trying on your own? So they put him in a dungeon to make the picture more clear. Because in that position, what does Jeremiah do? He begins to cry out to the Lord. Hungry, starving, cold, the shakes. He's in mire and mud. And all he has is the Lord saying, I look down on it. Psalm 102 says, the Lord looked down from the heights of his sanctuary. He beheld the earth. He heard the groaning of the prisoner to loose those that are appointed to death so they can declare the name of the Lord. This is how awesome this is. This is the surprise deliverance in Jeremiah 38. Listen to this. It says, Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian, one of the eunuchs which was in the king's house, just one serving the king, heard that they put Jeremiah in the dungeon, in the cistern, in the pit. And the king, sitting at the gate of Benjamin, Ebed-Melech, went forth out of the king's house, and he spoke to the king. An Ethiopian servant went to speak to the king. He said, my lord the king, these men have done evil in all they've done to Jeremiah the prophet. They cast him into that cistern that's in the middle of the prison, a dungeon, and he's going to die there of hunger in that place where he is because there's no bread in the city. Now listen, all you got to do is cry out. You leave the method up to God, okay? You leave the method, who he wants to use, how he wants to use them. You just go ahead and leave that part. All you have to do is cry out. You don't cry out and start strategizing. You just cry out. Because in this case, Jeremiah cries out, and whose ears get pricked? Whose heart gets moved? The king? The high priest? The religious? The prophets? No, a servant in the king's house. The one that's doing dishes and whistling. The Ethiopian eunuch. Out of nowhere, he's like, I got to go talk to the king. Now listen to this. It's perfect. He's from Ethiopia. He was enslaved to do work. We don't know what his upbringing was, but hey, he wasn't part of the king's house, okay? He was a servant in the house. And so you got to say it probably wasn't a really nice road. He probably knew what it was like to be in bondage. He probably knew what it was like to be sold. But he probably knew what it was like to not be somewhere you want to be. Perfect. That means his heart is open to the affliction of somebody else. Jeremiah. And what does he say to the king? He says, King, listen, these guys have done evil. They're wicked. Now, how would he know that kind of thing? Yeah, they're bad, but because he would know other people have been mean to him too. You see, there's a connection. And he approaches the king and says, I got to get this guy out of here. He's going to starve. Probably knew what it was like to be hungry, not have enough. Ebed Melech. The method is up to God. How he chooses to save you or deliver you is entirely up to him. All he wants you to do is to cry out, I need your help. I need your help right now. This is what I like about it. Ebed-Melech came to the king and said, My lord the king, these men have done evil. You've got to deliver them. This is what the king says. He says, go ahead and take 30 guys and just go take that prophet up out of the dungeon before he dies. Go ahead and deliver him. What does that tell me? First of all, it's miraculous because he's not going to survive down there. It's a miraculous thing. But second, the king actually said, do whatever you want with him. Put him in a dungeon, I don't care. But then the servant comes and says, you got to get him out of there. These guys are wicked. This guy's going to die. This is a man of God. And the king says, okay, take him out. Save his life. Now, what kind of turning? This is what it tells me. This is what it tells me. When God starts to go to rescue you, when he begins to do the work of rescuing you, no one's going to stop it. You hear me? No one can stop it. He was the one that could say, no, I've just put him in there. Let him die. He's the king, right? The seal, the authority. Remember, Ebed had to go to the king and ask him. He didn't just go get him out. He had to go ask the king, which means there are people in the path. There are ways in which to stop this from happening. But when God begins to do the rescue, nobody can stop him. Nobody can. When you call out and say, God, you need to help me with this ed bill. You need to help me with the health. You need to help me with this situation. You need to help me in this relationship. When you start calling out and God hears you and then begins to start putting the rescue operation in place, no one can stop it. I don't care. Hell can't stop it. The devil can't stop it. He's on a rescue mission. It all started with the calling out to God. See the picture here? Jeremiah is what the city was supposed to be doing. And here's the picture. Now, as believers, we have the truth. We get to see it. We know there's none like the God of Jeshurun who rides on the heavens to help me. All we got to do is cry out and help him. Now, you can become more sensitive to that by being in a position or place where you have nothing else to do but then to call out on the Lord. Has anybody in their life been to a place where you thought time was going to run out before you were going to make it? Has anybody been in a place where you thought time would run out before you were going to make it? It's true. Those places right there, they're the places that develop the sensitivity for you to call on the Lord as quick as you can. He's not looking to find out how smart you are and how much of a strategy. He's not looking for you to draft out the plan and then, Lord, this is how you could save me. Romans tells us that while I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. He did it while I was still sinning. He didn't wait for me to draft up the plan. I heard someone say the most foolish thing I've ever heard before in my whole life, that if I was God, I wouldn't let all this pain and suffering. If I was God. I said, did I hear that right? Because before we rejected God, there wasn't any pain and suffering. It didn't start this way, and it ain't going to end this way because God has a say. He's on a rescue mission. And from the very beginning, when he saw us go our own way, he put a plan in to rescue us. And there's no devil in hell that's going to stop him from finishing his rescuing plan. For all that call on the name of the Lord our God, any that call on him shall be saved. You just got to call on him. When you need $5 and all you've got is what, 2? You call on him. When you're tired and you can't pick up your other foot because you're so fatigued, you call on him. When you're not sure what to do and you're confused, you call on him. When you're backed against the wall and you feel the pressure, you call on him. When you're afraid because of something someone did or said to you, you call on him. When you're alone and the thoughts start pouring in and you're not sure what you're going to do or how you're going to handle it, you call on him. See, every one of those positions is like that cistern. I know the truth. I'm speaking the truth. But sometimes things happen in my life to prove the fact there is a God in heaven. Sometimes my life is the testimony so that other people can see. What do you do when you get in trouble? I call on him. I call on him. I call on him. I call on him. You say, what are you doing in there? You got the shower running. I can hear you shouting. Calling on the Lord. Once you call on him, let him do the delivering. And don't be surprised if it comes in an unusual way, using people you never expected. Ebed-Melech. Now think of this. Jeremiah is in the pit. He's probably freezing. Now it's moaning now. There's no crying. He's got no strength. He's crying out. And he looks up and he sees who pops up over the edge. Whose head? Jeremiah, are you still alive? Ebed-Melech, is that you? Maybe some chuckling, I don't know. God, you sent the Ethiopian eunuch to save me. How in the world did he even get it? How did he get approval? Grab the rope. Put it around your arms. He comes out. It's funny. That's great. Let me finish with this. Worship team, will you come up? Another song. Here's your moment this morning. I don't know what it is that you need to be rescued from this morning. Maybe it's something that you just can't, it's always been there and it can't get away. This is your opportunity to call out to the Lord. This is your opportunity this morning because that's the call this morning. You see, I could probably ask, and everybody here, including myself, has things that are facing me and I'm not sure how it's going to work out. And I should have called on the Lord a long time ago. But my tendency is to just kind of do as much as I can and, figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out. But God didn't ask us to do that. In fact, he showed us that. Listen, you just call out to the Lord. And if you have to do it over and over and over again, that's what the altars are for. Is that right? Am I right? That's what the altars are for. So you can call out to the Lord. Call out to the one that can help you. Call to the one that can save you, set you free. He's just waiting for you to call out, help. None of us have it right, do we? I'd like to meet the man or woman or student or child in here that hasn't got it all figured out. Because I'll just, you know what I mean? I'll just sit down and listen. But I take it that we don't have it all figured out, right? I don't. I keep making mistakes too. But when I get encouraged like this, where I can call out to the Lord and he'll help me, then I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to say Deuteronomy 33 is my verse. There is none like the God of Jeshurun who rides on the clouds to help me, who rides in great majesty to rescue me. The eternal God is my refuge, and underneath of the everlasting arms, the Lord goes out before me and declares to my enemy, destroy them! That's my God. I call on him, and if he's going to do that for me, when I call on him, and if he's going to be that for me, then I'll call him as much as I can. I'll stand up right today and say, Lord, every day, you're the one that I'm going to call on. Let's stand up this morning. Let's stand up. Worship team, would you lead us in this song? This song is us crying out to him. If you want to slip out of your seat and just come to the altar and do that, you can call it to the Lord. But whatever you're facing today that you need to call out to him, and he's showing you, hey, listen, you haven't called out to me. You haven't called out to me. I want to rescue you. Just simply make that seat your altar, come up to the front and say, Lord, I'm calling out for you tonight. Lord, help me today. Help me today. Amen. Worship team, would you lead us in some worship? Oh.
You calm my raging sea.
You walk with me through fire. Come on down the altar if you want to come down.